Alright guys, here is your video notes for watersheds and river basins of North Carolina. This will finish out standard 8.e.1.1 before we track out. So first of all, let's start talking about surface water. Surface water is kind of like what the word says. It's the water we find on the surface, and it comes from precipitation, rain, snow, sleet, hail. It soaks into the ground, or it runs downhill into water that will rest on the surface. So it's found on the surface in places like rivers, lakes, streams, or oceans. Fresh surface water locations: rivers, streams, and lakes. So here is some vocabulary understanding what those different bodies of water are. All right, so a river is a large channel along which water is continually flowing down a slope. Could be made up of many streams that come together called tributaries. A tributary are streams and smaller rivers that feed into a main large river. All right. A stream is a small channel along which water is continually flowing down a slope. It's made of small gullies. All right, and some of those will actually end up into a considerable sized contained body of water that you guys know as a lake. Okay, so you could have a stream which will flow into a tributary, which will then flow into a river, which could end up resting in a lake. So we have to talk about this word watershed. It's an area of land that drains water to the lowest point. If you think about things going down into a funnel, it would drain down into the funnel. All right, so a river, a stream, a lake, or an ocean. If you take a look at your diagram, up at the top of the mountain, we have rain, precipitation, snow. All right, hits the highest elevation and will then finally funnel itself down here, all right, into groundwater through runoff. All right, notice there's also percolation, all right, where water is sort of seeping into the bedrock. And aquifer, remember what we learned is this is water that is found just above the bedrock, and we can actually pump that water out for local use in our community. Everyone lives, works, or plays in a watershed. So don't think of a watershed being just the land near water. If you think of just all of the land that we live on, that is considered a watershed. All right, and watersheds like that, like I said, drain water to the lowest point. All right, usually because of the topography of the land and gravity taking over. In the diagram below, the land within the white, all right, is the watershed that drains into the tributary that will eventually flow to a larger river and then the ocean. All right, so that outlined area in white, you can see that the arrows show the direction water will flow based on the layout of the land. That flows into those blue lines, which are rivers and tributaries and streams, which will eventually drain to this larger body of water you see down here in the bottom right. Here's a picture of Wake County. All right, where we live, these are the major watersheds of Wake County. All right, so based on where you live in the county, you might be part of a different watershed. Where I live, I'm kind of on the boundary here between the Lower Neuse River and Crabtree Creek. All right, I would technically say I'm probably right on the border. And so these are just the major watersheds that we have here in Wake County. Obviously, there are plenty more in the state of North Carolina. In this image, it takes a look at Durham County, which is outlined here in green and bordered here on Wake County. And the reason I picked this is because Falls Lake is a major source of water for us here in Wake County, but it originates in Durham. All right. These little blue lines are all the tributaries that make up different watersheds. Okay, so the large body of water here of Falls Lake, you see these creeks that file off of that, and then smaller streams and creeks that could branch off of those as well. So these tributaries are all places where water can gather and collect, eventually make itself to the bigger rivers like the Neuse River or the Cape Fear, which eventually make their way to the ocean. How a watershed works, again, precipitation will hit the highest elevations, all right, and those highest elevations, obviously rivers and streams will move more rapidly because of their elevation. All right, everything sort of funnels down into the middle, which will eventually make its way to the larger body of water down here, which is the river, all right, which that river will then eventually make its way to the ocean. You can see there's infiltration here where water seeps into the ground from runoff, all right, which eventually could make its way to an aquifer down here, allowing water to be pumped up for use on the surface. Okay, this is called permeable because water can easily move through this underground area, or if it can't move, it's actually called impermeable. All right, all of these little tributaries, lakes, and streams, all right, are part of the watershed, but they'll form the river basin, which is basically the river collection plate or collection area for water to flow to an ocean. All right, so let's focus on our river basin. All right, it encompasses all the land, all right, surface drained by tributaries, which are your streams and creeks that flow downhill eventually into one larger river. All right, a river basin's final destination is an estuary. All right, estuaries are where the fresh water meets the salt water, or eventually it could end up in the ocean. To think of it in terms that may be a little easier to understand, all right, a bathtub catches all of the water falling within its sides. All right, so when you take a shower, the bathtub's job is to collect all that water. A river basin sends all the water falling on surrounding land into a central river and out to an estuary or an ocean. All right, so consider the shower head to be the precipitation. All right, the tub is the watershed collecting the water. The drain is going to be the river basin where the water eventually will flow, all right, and leave your tub out to the estuaries or oceans. Freshwater locations, river basins, and watersheds. Wake County is located mainly on the Neuse River Basin. All right, the largest river basin in North Carolina is the Cape Fear River Basin. All right, the Cape Fear and Neuse River Basins are made of many small watersheds. I'm going to show you a map of what that looks like. Okay, so here's the North Carolina River Basin. I've marked in yellow and circle, Raleigh. All right, you can see that Raleigh, North Carolina is part of this purple river basin right here, all right, which is the Neuse River Basin. But you can see that North Carolina is made up of quite a few river basins. Okay, it actually has 17. 5 of those 17 actually flow into the Mississippi River Basin, and those 5 are along our western part of our state. All right, these will actually flow towards the Ohio River, which I'll show you in a moment, and eventually into the Mississippi River, which those will feed into the Gulf of Mexico. Everything to the east of that will flow into the Pamlico Sound here and eventually the North Carolina coast, which is the Atlantic Ocean. Some river basins will become watersheds to another larger river basin, such as the Mississippi River. All right, so like I said, the western counties of North Carolina flow into the Mississippi River Basin, and some of those have to go through the Ohio River Basin before they make it to the Mississippi River. So if we take a look at the whole United States, okay, here is a watershed boundary, and I told you those western counties of North Carolina, all right, those will eventually flow towards the Ohio River Basin, which eventually will feed into the Mississippi River Basin, which will then down here in Louisiana feed into the Gulf of Mexico. All right, here's another picture of that if we look at it in color. All right, obviously everything to the east of the purple will flow into the Atlantic Ocean. All right, and again, all of the water collected in these places comes from precipitation. All right, that funneling process, and you can see where things meet. We have a big confluence right here of the Mississippi River, all right, which will eventually feed into the lower Mississippi River Basin and then out into the Atlantic Ocean. So just some essential vocabulary that you have to look at: tributaries, watershed, and river basin. All right, and then I want to show you this brief video that will explain the importance. I mean, is a watershed really that important?
What is a watershed? Is it a shed that holds water? Nah, try again. A watershed is all of the land that drains into the same location or body of water. People tend to think only of water bodies, such as rivers, lakes, and wetlands, as being part of their watershed. However, any land, whether it is park, farm, forest, school parking lot, and even the soil we build our homes on is also included. Think of a watershed as a funnel, collecting all the water within a specific area and draining into the nearest body of water. Drop by drop, water is channeled into soil, groundwater, creeks and streams, making its way to larger rivers and eventually the ocean. Everyone in the world lives in a watershed. Watersheds know no political borders, whether local, national, or international. Our environment, our economy, and our society all depend on a healthy watershed.